Welcome to the screencast, Perfect Punctuation. This is part 4 of 4, the apostrophe. So here are the learning outcomes for part 4 of this presentation. By the end of it, you should be able to understand how to use an apostrophe with a singular and plural noun and avoid common errors that students make with apostrophes. Here's what we're going to do in this brief screencast. We'll explain the 3 rules for the apostrophe, then we'll describe the errors that students commonly make with apostrophes, and then we'll discuss how to avoid these errors in your own writing. Apostrophe rule number 1. Form the possessive of a singular noun by adding an apostrophe and s. Here are 2 examples. After playing in the mud, Elaine's dogs rushed into the house to greet Tammy. The Great Dane put her muddy paws on Tammy's white skirt. So here we have a singular noun, Elaine. We're adding apostrophe s to indicate that the dogs belong to Elaine. Similarly, with the singular noun Tammy, we add apostrophe s to indicate that the white skirt belongs to Tammy. And here's apostrophe rule number 2. Form the possessive of a singular noun ending in s by adding an apostrophe and s. Here are 2 examples. Jess's speech was a success. Her boss's office had a beautiful view. So here we have the singular noun Jess, and we've added apostrophe s to indicate that the speech is Jess's speech. And similarly, we have the singular noun boss. We've added apostrophe s to indicate that the office belongs to the boss. So one thing you may find, there is some disagreement among linguists and grammar specialists about whether you need that final s after the apostrophe. I would say that you do, especially in those words where you can actually hear that final s pronounced. So if you listen to these words pronounced, you'd get Jess's, so you can hear that final s after the apostrophe, and bosses. And so I would argue that you do need to have the apostrophe and the s, especially because you can hear that final s. Apostrophe rule number 3. Form the possessive of a plural noun by adding an apostrophe and s. If the plural noun ends in s, which is probably most likely, then add an apostrophe after the s. So here are some examples. Tammy did not appreciate the children's giggles. So in this case, we have a plural noun that doesn't end in s, the word children. So we just add apostrophe s to indicate possession. And the next one, she jumped out of her chair, knocking over both dogs' water bowls. So in this one, we have a plural noun, dogs. And so to make the possessive of this plural noun, we add just the apostrophe. And in the last example, the employees liked their boss's ideas for improvement. We have the plural noun bosses, and we just add the apostrophe to indicate possession, to indicate that the ideas are the bosses. Now here's a list of the common errors students tend to make. First, they often omit apostrophes, or they might put them in when they shouldn't be there. So those are 2 common errors that I see. Sometimes they use the singular possessive for a plural possessive. So for example, supposing you were writing about 2 girls and you were writing about their mother, then you'd say the girl's mother. But you wouldn't write it like this, because this would just be one girl, singular. This is a singular possessive. So if you had 2 girls and you were writing about the girl's mother, then it should be G-I-R-L S apostrophe. Students often will try to form the possessive by adding an apostrophe in the words yours, hers, his, theirs, ours, and its. And of course, these possessive pronouns do not take an apostrophe. And here they are written correctly. Another mistake I often see is mistaking its for its and vice versa. So writing its for the possessive and using it apostrophe s. Of course, it apostrophe s is short for it is. And so one way to avoid making this mistake is to just simply not use the contraction its, it apostrophe s. Always write it is. And otherwise, when you're using its for the possessive, then you'll know that you've written it correctly. Another mistake is inserting the possessive, inserting the apostrophe indicating the possessive into decades. So when you're writing decades, you don't put the apostrophe in. You just write them without the apostrophe like this. So how can you avoid these errors? Well, we've already talked about its and its. That's just something to watch for. But one thing is to proofread carefully. And one thing you can do, another thing you can do, is to make a list of the errors that you commonly make and then watch for them when you proofread. As well, it's always a good idea to proofread just for apostrophes, not for anything else, not for any other forms of punctuation. If you do a read through of your work just looking for apostrophe errors, then you're much more likely to find them because your eyes are scanning just for mistakes with apostrophes. So in summary, review the rules for singular and plural nouns and apostrophes. Be especially careful when writing its and its. Make a list of the punctuation errors you tend to make, and do a special proofread for apostrophe errors.